Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is a Monday. It is April the 21st, and I appreciate you joining me. So a couple little bits of things have happened. We had Easter Sunday. I have some reflections on that. We had a pope pass away. And in a completely unrelated situation, J.D. Vance got to visit with the pope. I'm not implying anything. I'm just saying he's leaving the Vatican. Yeah, we're not going to make a lot of light of this. Like all Catholics, I think, and maybe many people who are Christians in the world are praying for the repose of the soul of Pope Francis. And at the same time, we also hope that the next pope will be a little bit more Catholic, a little bit less opposed to the traditions of the church that I've been a part of my whole life. So that is, I'm not even going to say that much about it. I mean, I made it the headline just because it's what every single news outlet is running with. They're all very, very excited to report it. The interesting thing is because the Pope was a very left-leaning figure, a kind of someone who followed what's called liberation theology, which is essentially Marxism. It's just wrapped in Christianity. Because the last Pope, I guess he's now the last Pope, the former Pope, was a proponent of Marxism, the left is fawning on him. They all have these great articles, and it doesn't matter whether it's CBS or ABC or NBC or MSNBC, the CNN, they all have these praiseworthy things because he was interested in the plight of migrants. He's the same sort of guy that we remember talking about, saying that if you got the vaccine shot, it was something that you got out of love. And it brought a bunch of other things back into focus for me. So today, in light of the fact that the Trump administration has published out an entire page talking about COVID, we're going to discuss a little bit about COVID, the danger of having personnel sorted out specifically by whether or not they have a particular political lean. And that is truly dangerous stuff. It really is. So we're going to get into a little bit of that. The fact that our government tends to hire people more and more that focus on one political view and trying to create homogeneity in that space, it is bad for Americans because you cannot have the executive part of our government represent only half of the country when we are so factionalized right now. So that's it. We're also going to talk about how the left continues to dive in on illegal aliens. They just can't get enough of it. They cannot get enough of calling them migrants. So not only are we going to talk about a little bit more of the Abrego Garcia thing, because that continues to be something the left is fixated on, they're also now worried about Venezuelans who have lost this sort of temporary protected status in the United States. And so now the ACLU has gone to court and countless dollars are spent on all of this. This is all majoring in the minors. They are all spending significant amounts of political capital and time just throwing garbage at Americans and saying that you must have the same sort of fringe elitist communist beliefs that we have. You must agree with us. I don't know where they come up with that stuff. And then additionally, Donald Trump dropped some pictures over the Friday into the Saturday showing exactly why they got rid of Abrego Garcia. I've got a little footage from inside the actual prison because he was not at that maximum security prison, apparently, which is why we saw him sitting in regular street clothes hanging out with a U.S. senator. That was always kind of strange, right? That was the joke yesterday or on Friday that we talked about. He's there sipping margaritas. So that's kind of a bad look. And then lastly, an interesting piece coming out of Vanity Fair. We're going to wrap up with FBI stuff. We often do. But Vanity Fair is running cover for a guy that you may have already forgotten about, but I have not. And that is that this man named Brian Driscoll. Driscoll was the acting director of the FBI for a short period of time. He became a hero of the so-called Trump resistance inside the FBI. And I have some thoughts on it. And the problem is, not only are they winning, it's possible that they've already won. And that's really dark and sort of upsetting for those of us who pay attention to this kind of stuff. All right. So That's where we're going to go. Before we get started, let's go ahead and get started with friends of ours, the folks over at Blackout Coffee. And I'll tell you what, it was coffee day on Friday. Look at this. I got 2 of their 5-pound bags. I got 10 pounds of coffee, so much that my little kids couldn't even carry it in. So I just wanted to show you. This showed up. And if you ever order 5 pounds of coffee at a time, it feels like you really got something. All right. So, folks, we've been telling you about Blackout Coffee for a few months, and if you haven't heard about it, we'll let you just break it down right here. It's a company that's built on American values and grit and hard work and determination. 6 years ago, the founders started in their home garage. Today, they're slinging those massive bags out to places like my house from a 64,000 square foot warehouse where they're roasting all the beans in-house and they're packing the orders themselves, and they're employing 30 hardworking Americans with no corporate nonsense, just damn good coffee made by people who actually give a damn. That's my backup, by the way. I bought 2 of those things. So in the Seraphin house, we don't like to run out of coffee. I tend to stockpile some things I think will be of great value, and that's one of those things. I feel like it's got high barter potential, but it also has high functionality potential. Blackout Coffee is not just about making a great cup of coffee. It's about supporting Americans and the American dreams, not the illegal clowns that are being supported by the political left right now. They built a coffee company the right way with no shortcuts and no woke nonsense and no woke beans and no weak beans. And if you believe in that kind of thing, like hard work and values and coffee that gets you moving, it's time to make the switch. You can tell I am pumped up. I didn't even get that much sleep over the weekend for various reasons, which we will not go into. But there was something about a brisket and waking up at 2 a.m. to check on the internal temperature. I'm not a barbecue guy, so that didn't work out real well. Anyway, go to blackoutcoffee.com/KYLE. Again, it's blackoutcoffee.com/KYLE. 20% off with my name, Kyle. 20% off your first order. Keep the American dream alive. Support real coffee. Drink Blackout at blackoutcoffee.com/KYLE. Let's dive into this. We got a lot to get into today. Okay, all right. So, let's start with something kind of interesting. Okay, this is a piece that I saw Michael Knowles do. I don't watch a ton of Michael Knowles' podcasts, not because I don't care for what he has to say. I just don't watch a lot of podcasts in general. When you're in this sort of work, I catch a lot of clips. I catch a lot of like sideline stuff, but I don't end up watching things in full. This is thematic because we just celebrated Easter. If you're a Christian, you had Easter yesterday. And I found this particular clip amazing because they hit this little piece called the First Selfie. And science, every time that science advances to the point where it ends up proving parts of our religious understanding, I find that to be really fascinating. For me, it was looking at genetics when I was in college. After I graduated from college, I went back to school after being in the military, and I'm taking all these classes because I thought I was going to be a PA. I thought I was going to be in the medical field. What a weird change that would have been, huh? I actually thought I was going to go either to med school or to PA school, work in the medical field, and then I would have faced down COVID from the inside as like a physician's assistant, maybe as an MD. I don't know how that would have worked. I'm kind of a contrarian thinker to begin with. And interestingly enough, I think COVID showed a lot of us where we stood. A lot of people had experiences that made them question basic institutions that they didn't question because they just didn't have any reason to. But they saw the goalposts move in real time. They saw deception being played out. I got a little clip from Tucker Carlson to kind of talk about that. It's similar to my own feelings on it. And you remember, he was real quiet about that because he was working for Fox. Again, when I looked into genetics, when I started studying genetics from people, the endowed chair of the genetics department at Texas State University was my professor. And I didn't get a great grade in that class. I think I struggled to get a B because it was actually pretty difficult. It was very intense. It was mathematically intense, and it was not just a survey course, and a lot of people ended up finding it to be a weed out. But as we dug into the mechanics of how your genetics actually work, how genetics works, for all creatures, DNA replication, RNA, and all the different sort of mechanisms within the cell to transmit information. For me, that was a more compelling argument for the existence of God than looking into the cosmos and seeing the vastness of space and all the individual stars and all the things. I've taken astronomy courses and gone like, oh, that's really cool. It also looks like it could be completely random. I know people that look into the stars and they see the existence of a divine being. For me, it was looking into our cells at almost the atomic level and seeing the organization and the machines that work at an absolutely infinitesimally accurate rate so that we stay alive and don't fall apart. And so anyway, this little Michael Knowles clip, I think, illustrates some of the science backing up faith people.
Oh, man.
That's what I'm going to call it.
Sunrise that first Easter morning, April 5th, AD 33, would have been 5:43 a.m. Mary goes to the tomb very early. It's still dark. Why? She's mourning the dead. She walks into the tomb. She stoops down. She looks in. What does she see? She sees the linen cloths lying there. And I believe when she goes to get Peter and John, this is brand new for your program. I'm publishing right now with an archaeologist on what I'm about to share. It wasn't when they saw the 2,750-pound stone removed that they believed. It wasn't even when they saw that the tomb was empty and there was no body that they believed. The scripture is very clear. There's an economy of words in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We only have 89 chapters in the Gospels that cover parts of 26 days of the life of Jesus. That's all we have. Remember, John said if we wrote everything, the libraries couldn't contain it, but these have been written so that you believe. John stoops down and looks in, and it says, when he saw the Athonia, the Sinden, the Sudarium, the shroud, he believed. He saw and he believed. And what I'm publishing right now, I believe that the shroud had the face of Jesus glowing on it. Why else could it not? Every time Jesus manifests himself, he always manifests himself, according to Scripture, in magnificent light. Think about Saul, the apostle. You just quoted him, Galatians 3:28. You were quoting. He's on the way to Damascus, and I have filmed on first century roads when it's hot in Israel, and it's the sun is blazing. You probably have too. And yet he sees Jesus, and the evidential narrative that we have in the book of Acts is that it was lighter than the noonday sun. In Mark 9, when Jesus appears to the disciples, literally Jesus' body is glistening. Same thing we see in the Old Testament. And so why would, and I want to make sure our audience, because I understand people are hearing about the shroud for the very first time today. The shroud is an image of a crucified man, the front and back of a badly traumatized, crucified man with wounds that correspond to the brutality that Jesus of Nazareth experienced. The image, we believe, was formed by 34,000 trillion watts of energy in 1/40th of a billionth of a second, according to Paul DeLazzo, my friend at Enea Labs in Rome. This is the moment of resurrection. We have God, if you will, in Jesus taking the first selfie.
In this sort of time when everything is narcissistic and looks back, and this sort of navel-gazing experience of people who want to share their life with everybody, and the selfie culture, I just found like his little reference there was somewhat interesting. What's also interesting is how divisive the idea of the Shroud of Turin is. So I don't know that this guy can prove what he's saying. I found it to be interesting that a lot of people have been interested in this particular relic for a very long time. For me, the funniest thing is something that I keep seeing comedians point out, which is that the story of the rolling back of the great tombstone is that there was the disciple and Peter have a foot race to get there, not just because that's how men are, because we're competitive, and the disciple wins, and it is mentioned multiple times. It just turns out that disciple is John, and it's John's gospel that says it. So that's really funny to me. And there's all these little skits that I've seen now on TikToks. It's kind of funny to see Christian comedy, because there is a lot of humanity inside the stories of the Bible. And so for whatever I've got actually a really silly thing that has nothing to do with the Bible, but has everything to do with Easter as our palate cleanse today. So the reason why I'm bringing some of this stuff up is because I don't remember religion being discussed nearly as much when I was a kid. I feel like now we're in a time when finances are tough. People are having a hard time affording housing. We went through 4 years of economic difficulties. With the Biden administration, we've had an invasion of this country. All of the things that are going wrong. There's persecution of people for both their personally held beliefs, which are actually hold the force of religion, according to the United States law. If you look at Title VII, that's the way it works. You don't actually have to have a quote unquote religious belief. It is a sincerely held belief, which may or may not abide with your religion. Many of us found this stuff out during the COVID experience as workers in this country. And we also found out that the administrators and the adjudicators of those particular policies, which were meant to say that the government will not weigh in on matters of faith because it has no ability to decide what is and what is not religious. It just says if you are found to have sincerely held beliefs, the default position is if you say it, we believe that it is in fact real. And the issue that I see right now comes from this story, and I found this and I shared it with the fellow suspendable types that we've got, whether they be our journalist friends or whether they be our friends that are former government workers. Officers who attended Donald Trump's J6 rally are now petitioning the Supreme Court to allow their anonymity in public records. There's a lot in this story. It comes out of Seattle and about the Seattle PD. And I don't know that you're going to hear this covered in a lot of other places. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on it. I actually think this, for people in America, is potentially more important than knowing whether or not there's going to be another pope and what he's going to be about, because Americans, we tend to separate our faith leadership. Even if you go to a church, if that faith leader that you have, a pastor, a priest, a bishop, etc., if that person says things that are in direct conflict the way that you plan on living your lives, you don't just blindly cede it. You don't just say, well, that's what this person said, so I must do what it is. And if you are one of those people, you might want to look a little bit more deeply. Those around you in America, we tend to hold what we believe to be at a higher level. And in fact, the law supports that. For example, when you were going through your medical or religious accommodation requests saying you didn't want to get a COVID vaccine shot. I'm generalizing. Obviously, not everybody who listens to this podcast had that experience, but some of you do. And if you didn't, then you have friends who did. What was interesting is there was this request. Well, like, can there be someone, a faith leader? Is there an authority that you can appeal to that will validate that your opinion is in fact the way that your religion feels? And that's not the way U.S. law is written. We found that out, and that tyranny kind of crept in because of that. This is an equally interesting sort of facet to that. This is on the political end. 4 Seattle police officers who attended the Stop the Steal rally. There were a total of 6 that were investigated by the Seattle PD, but 4 of them have been petitioning to keep their names out of public records request. And interestingly enough, because this story was written by CBS, it says keep their names out of public records related to the insurrection, because our news media totally doesn't weigh in on what people should think or feel about this stuff. It says the group consists of current and former Seattle police officers who were in the department who initially sued the city of Seattle to prohibit January 6 investigative records from being released without their names being redacted. They didn't want their names thrown out there in the public because they felt like their political leanings were not the business of the public. It says, at its core, this appeal involves whether a government agency can ignore the chilling effect. This is really important because it was argued by every single person I know that was involved in this. The chilling effect of highlighting speech in a negative way. They wanted to see if they could ignore the chilling effect resulting from an employer requiring an employee to disclose off-duty political activities and attendant impressions or motivations that are associated therewith, followed by widespread dissemination to those who deliberately seek this information to subject these public servants to vilification without the commission of any misconduct whatsoever. In other words, they are looking to try to associate people with something that happened, and they are looking to establish guilt by association. And that is the problem. Our society has gotten so quick to judge, so slow to wait for evidence, that we now presuppose that if you were at that rally, that it means that you are 100% on board with everything that Donald Trump has said, and that you are now guilty of the same things that maybe some trespassers were involved in, or maybe some people who damaged some property were involved in, or maybe some people, a very, very small number of people, like in the dozens, that decided to engage in fights with police. And I'm not assigning blame one way or another. I don't think you should have been fighting with police. That's just my opinion about January 6th. So there are some people that should have been prosecuted. But to see thousands of people prosecuted is wild. And to see the media smear that went out there is also wild. And to say that that somebody's off-duty, completely irrelevant decision that has nothing to do with their work should now be paraded out in public in order to give them guilt by association, it further, because of the narrative that was established in this media, right here, related to the insurrection. Direct quote from the piece. They've already assigned things that were never proven in court to be true. It's problematic. And I think it's a deeper problem in this country at this moment. We are now seeing what that looks like. We are looking to say, well, you didn't do this one thing. Now I know all the things about you. Early on, I talked to Steve Baker, who's a journalist. He works for The Blaze, and he was a journalist on the days of January 6th. There's a reason why we cannot move past this. It's the reason why Donald Trump started off his second administration by looking into the issues that existed in the first term, and particularly the end of that first term. There's a couple things that America will not move past until we solve this problem. We have to take the idea that you can adjudicate somebody's politics and decide whether or not that they are worthy of life or liberty, the pursuit of happiness. We have to decide that we are not going to be a society that says 50% of the population is a bad person because of what they believe politically. And their politics and their religion are very tied together. The Suspendables have proven this, have shown this. The Suspendables being me, Garrett O'Boyle. By the way, that's a joke name. Do you guys know that? Do you know that the name Suspendables was something that we put out as a joke, calling to attention a bunch of things that the Bureau had done to people in the FBI? We signed it Suspendables as a joke, and the New York Times, who recently ran a piece about Dan Bongino and the fact that guys like me and Garrett and Steve and Phil and George and a couple of others that you don't know the name of, Marcus Allen, they're running pieces saying, hey, these guys have been widely critical of the FBI at large. It didn't have to do with who the president was, and it didn't have to do with who the director was. My issues with a government agency is that the government agency is not serving the people. And interestingly enough, I'm going to show you a clip that shows you that the guys who run the FBI today, the Dan Bonginos as deputy director, the Kash Patels as director, they agreed with us right up until the point where they stepped into those seats and into those offices. There's a piece that I'm not going to cover on the New York Times that specifically quoted me, because I had the first time, I had people from the New York Times reach out to me and ask for a comment. And my comment is consistent. We cannot have government deciding what are acceptable opinions. We cannot have a government that sways like the wind and decides who is good and who is bad. I hope the Supreme Court get this right, that they keep people's private lives private. We used to have this concept. Today, because so many people want to put their entire life out on media, and by the way, I do this reluctantly every day. This is not a thing, like I enjoy doing what I'm doing here. But I didn't set out in my life to become someone that spoke in front of a camera or sat there and you watched on your phone or your computer screens. That's not what I wanted to do. There are people that did want to do that with their lives. And I have no problem with it. Like you, I consumed podcasts, like while I was working, when I was not in the middle of doing something that directly needed my attention. If I was on a road trip, if I was driving, if I was commuting in and out to work, I was listening to radio, usually talk radio for information. I was listening to podcasts to find out what was going on in the world. We've got people that have decided that if you listen to even a certain podcast, you are now smeared. It's truly a dangerous shift, I think. I don't know how we get out of it. I really don't. It troubles me that we've moved to a point where we're no longer able to just accept that people are the person that they present and that their private life is their own business. I'm going to play you a couple of clips here I'm going to play some clips from this discussion about Abrego Garcia, which continues onward. I had something about Mike Lindell. Again, I want to get into COVID in a minute. This is what dropped over the weekend that has made this all so silly. I don't think that the Trump administration set this up as a trap, but I think just like so many opportunities, when your enemy is making a mistake, you let them continue to do it. And the enemies are people that have decided that Americans who like Donald Trump, Americans who are conservative, that mostly align with Trump's policies, not all, but most, even people who just simply voted for the guy, they are a problem, that they are morally bad. So here you have Newsmax talking about the picture that Trump put out over, I think it was on Friday afternoon, and it's fantastic. It's a picture of the hand, which the government obviously had pictures of tattoos of this guy, because you photograph all identifying markers as part of your intake. It says, does Kilmar Abrego Garcia have an MS-13 tattoo on his hand? This went into the public simply because a U.S. senator from Maryland flew down to meet with the guy and had some unadulterated pictures of his hand. What's even crazier is, here's some of the additional evidence. You've got the woman who is married to him putting out Give, Send, Go or GoFundMe or whatever it is, fundraisers, and she always blurred out this hand. She covered it with like emojis and things like that. Why would that be? Because even though it doesn't expressly say the letters MS13, the letters and numbers, it's not an alphanumeric. These are symbols from the gang that are common in that gang. And if you guys don't think that gang intelligence units understand what are common amongst people, this is real simple evidence. All you do is you go, okay, this person was involved in gang activity. The associates of this person are other gang members. they associate and they hang out doing gang activities. They're involved in extortion. They're involved in violent crime, whatever it may be, and they are caught in that general act. And then you see, okay, well, what sort of tattoos, what sort of identifying marks have they associated themselves with? What do they wear? Are they wearing Chicago's Bulls hats because it shows the horns, which is a satanic thing? Are they wearing the actual words on their body that spell out MS-13? Do they have symbols that generally are stand-ins for that because they're trying to get clever? And of course, he has something that is identified as gang tattoos on his freaking hands. It's the first thing that you would see when you meet the guy. All right, so the White House posted what it considers proof that he's an MS-13 gang member. Again, discrediting language coming. This is from Theo Berman over at Newsweek. Trump said that the MS-13 is tattooed on his knuckles, although critics say the images do not back up his claims and they could have been faked, could have been, might have been, leaning on. The fact of the matter is, the polling says is that Democrats are trying to engage in the strongest single thing that Donald Trump has in common with the regular American people. And more importantly, how are you going to stop this? Because right now, their hope is the Supreme Court is going to issue strong language telling the executive what it must do and what it must force another country to do. And it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. I think this little clip from Bill Maher is kind of interesting because he highlights that Democrats are essentially not just majoring in the minors, but they are leaning into impotence. And that's why this is the time to re-adjudicate the things that were done wrong, whether it be COVID, whether it be January 6th. There is no ability to resist this thing. And this is also the time to fix the illegal immigration problem. There's no reason not to. It's got to be leaned into. Here's Bill Maher basically telling us that he's acknowledging the reality. There's no way that the left can actually resist this right now. I'll show you some fun infighting with James Cargill and David Hogg as well, which is also kind of fun to me to see people getting into the fight.
Americans are in support of deporting criminals. Absolutely. Violent criminals, it's like 97-1. Yes, deport the violent criminals, but they're not in favor at all of the president of the United States defying the Supreme Court. It's like an 80-20 issue. He's on the wrong side of that.
But okay, but so what? If I may address the little shot you just gave me, so fucking what, okay? I don't understand this. We're at that part of the movie where there's a gunfight, and the guy, and then click, click. There's no more bullets in the gun. We have no power. So how do we handle this? And Gretchen Whitmer showed us one way. Can we show that picture? Because she was in the Oval Office, same place I was a few weeks before. And this is what she did. Okay, I think there's a couple of ways to handle the Oval Office, and this is not the way I chose. You don't want to talk to people? You have no power.
So if you couldn't see, because you're listening, Gretchen Whitmer was standing. This is a photograph that was sort of a viral push. She's standing, and inexplicably, she's covering her face while other people are being photographed in the Oval Office. In other words, I'm going to try to do the same thing that the MS tattoo and the same thing that we saw described as evidence of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, that they have money signs and the mouth and the ears and the eyes are all covered up, which is to say, hear no, speak no, see no, evil. It's kind of a play on things. She's covering herself up to hide from it. But it's not what the political left is doing by and large. They're putting their faith in, I guess, the judiciary, which is supposed to be the weakest branch. It is Article 3. It is the third of the three branches. It's supposed to be a referee and not actually go in and try to create policy. But that's how they're hoping to create policy, because they've lost the legislative, Article 1, and they've lost the executive, Article 2. So this is a story coming from ABC News. Inside the ACLU's race to stop Venezuelans being deported to Salvadorian prisons. America's Civil Liberties Union. Now, in theory, if these people were consistent, you would actually listen and go, oh, okay, yeah, sure. They have principles. But that's not what they've done. These are not the same people. Do you see any ACLU lawsuits to try to stop the FBI from going after, I don't know, Christians who sat and prayed outside of an abortion clinic and were punished under the FACE Act? No, you don't see that. So when you lose principle, you also lose standing in regular people's eyes, because most people don't actually get that political. They just go, hey, are you consistent? Oh, you're not consistent? Oh, you just lean aggressively into one side? The ACLU used to defend the rights of Nazis to run around and have parades. Did they love Nazis? No. But they thought that it was important that people had speech. They don't think that anymore. Now they've just leaned into like hardcore leftist causes, so they're going to do this thing. They described, the lead attorney described to ABC News the rapid pace of legal action that led to the extraordinary ruling the Supreme Court early on Saturday morning, that's over the weekend, that blocks the Trump administration from deporting Venezuelans to a prison in El Salvador. Except the people that Trump said he wanted to deport was who? TDA members? Gang members? That they have already sort of had a different ruling on that said that under the Alien Enemies Act, you can do that. So all they got to do is determine that these people are out there. What's crazy is we're in this time where we're worrying about process. We're worrying about whether or not we're going to see individuals adjudicated each individual time on whether they can leave the United States. But nobody did it on the way in. Nobody cared who they let in. That's one of my whistleblower disclosures, folks. It's one of the things that I went forward with early on. In October of 21, when I sat down with my congresswoman's staff, the first thing I told them is like, we have 100,000 Afghan refugees here. There are 20,000 in our little area of responsibility. There are 10,000 at Holloman Air Force Base. There are another 10,000 sitting down at Fort Bliss, which is just outside of El Paso in Texas, and also New Mexico. I said, we don't know who they are. And they're allowed to just walk off into the United States. Nobody vetted the people that we physically brought in, never mind the open and porous borders. And I went and dealt with guys in Border Patrol, and I dealt with guys in Customs and Border Protection, the two different parts of DHS. It's like, who's coming in? And they're like, yeah, we don't know. They just walk. Here's where the fence is. Here's where the border is set up. Over there are these things that are called Normandy barriers. They're just like two X's with a little line in between them, and it holds a bunch of barbed wire. And you can just roll them out of the way. You can push them out of the way with a car. You could have a couple guys go and lean them up and then just drive in. Just drive into the United States. We don't know who they are. And each one of those people who just came in here completely unvetted, we're supposed to individually find out what we think about them, even though they broke the law to get here. So that's the piece that they're leaning on. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And you've got U.S. senators flying down to foreign nations. Apparently it's not in violation of the Logan Act, at least by the most liberal reading of it. But people could look at it and say, what is he doing? Because he's trying to engage in foreign policy. He's actually trying to engage in an executive function. If Congress wanted to do the job of Congress, they could have gotten rid of the APA and actually legislate things and actually do line item budgets for what they wanted to pass money for. They don't want to do that. They want to do these show hearings. So now we've got Tom Homan going on ABC and straightening out people who are on the left that are inviting him on to speak because he's interesting and the things he has to say are of value to them. And you know, they're trying to defend positions. They're not being journalists. Some of this is going to get broader because this is where we all started questioning institutions. We started realizing like, hey, there's some kind of agenda here. And I found it very interesting. I've got a clip later on. Tucker Carlson said he was in the news business, which meant he was in the deception business. That should be really troubling to people when folks start admitting that. And it should be troubling that Tucker Carlson acknowledges that his business was deception. I think he's a really bright guy, but he clearly is moving, he was moving around and making a bunch of money, mouthing things that maybe he didn't even believe in until he was able to leave, until he had enough money that it didn't matter in that space, or he had enough clout that he could stand up for his own. Like some of us did it without any backing whatsoever. Anyway, here's Tom Homan trying to stop the renewed resistance, which is amazing. That's one of the sub headlines here on this ABC clip.
Senator Van Hollen has obviously got a chance to meet with him, but he had to travel to El Salvador to get any information. Does that concern you at all? I mean, these are people sent by the United, in his case, sent by the United States, and not even a U.S. senator could get any information about his whereabouts or the condition of his incarceration without actually going down and making the trip to El Salvador himself?
Well, he obviously knew his whereabouts because he went there to see him. But what bothers me more than that is a U.S. senator traveled to El Salvador on taxpayer dime to meet with an MS-13 gang member, public safety threat terrorist. In the meantime, the day before he traveled, an illegal alien was arrested for murder, released to the streets rather than honoring an ICE detainer in his very own state. What concerns me is Van Hollen never went to the border the last 4 years on Joe Biden when he had a 600% increase in sex trafficking in women and children. You have a record number of no-inspected terrorists crossing that border. You had 250,000 Americans die from fentanyl overdose because of the open border. You got over 4,000 illegal aliens died making that journey, which is a historic record. What shocks me is he's remained silent on the travesty that happened on our southern border. Many people died. Thousands of people died. I met with hundreds of angel moms and dads who buried their children that were murdered by illegal alien. How many angel moms and dads has he met in the state of Maryland? That's what concerns me.
And so then you got stories like this, another ABC story. So that was ABC News talking about it. Tom Homan straightened this guy out. He doesn't really have a great response to it. And this is the headline. Venezuelan migrant whose deportation was blocked by Supreme Court speaks out. So you've got American news commuting down to a detention center in Texas to try to get what a 19-year-old illegal alien has to say and what his thoughts are, because that's what we really care about as Americans, right? Why does that voice get promoted instead of some of the others that are because there's an opportunity cost here. In the same way that there's an enforcement cost that when you prioritize certain things, you're not going to be able to do others. This is a significant, ridiculous use of resources to me. After his deportation was temporarily blocked by the Supreme Court, again, God knows how much money spent in legislative costs, a 19-year-old Venezuelan migrant named Alessandro Paredes spoke to ABC News from the detention center that he was being held at in Texas. I want to just hone in on the fact that he's 19, he's not from America, and he doesn't have a legal right to be here. He doesn't have a green card, he doesn't have a visa, so there's no ground to stand on. And he's going to get a full written up story by one of our major news sources. And he says the following. I just want you to think about how many 19-year-olds are experts on their own situation, let alone anything else. He says, quote, "This is not being done by law. It's totally illegal, and it's out of the blue." What? How do you know what the law is? Like, I don't even know what the law is, and I used to work in law enforcement. It's just that Title VIII was not the place that I spent my time. This guy is an expert on Title VIII U.S. law? Really? It's fairly incredible. You've got the White House spokesperson saying Trump promised the American people to use all lawful means and measures to remove the threat of terrorist illegal aliens, like members of TDA from the United States, and we're confident in the lawfulness of this administration's action and ultimately the prevailing against the onslaught of meritless litigation brought by radical activists who care more about the rights of terrorist aliens than those of the American people. So that's what we've set up. We've set up one side who thinks that if you went to January 6th, you were a terrorist and you're a bad person and you should never have a job and definitely not in law enforcement. We've got the same side saying that if you didn't go and get a certain number of shots, if you didn't just follow the science that was being purveyed by people who lied to us like right through their teeth, then you're a problem. And at the same time, you have to actually just accept that a 19-year-old knows what the law is and that the tons of money that they're spending is a good thing. And it's not that they hate Americans. They're crying about due process. Suddenly, these people cared about due process. Suddenly, they care about norms, like cultural norms. Isn't that shocking? I'm gonna read from my buddies over at Patriot Coolers right now while I'm thinking about it. I'm gonna break away. I'm on a roll right here, so let's just take a deep breath. Because I'm drinking coffee out of my Patriot Cooler. If you guys don't have one, this is a 20-ounce coffee mug. This one fits in your cup holder. I just did some mechanical work, some preventative maintenance on my truck, and this is what will normally live in the cup holder there. PatriotCoolers.com is the website. Kyle, Kyle, is the promo code. You'll save 10% at any given time. You'll save yourself a couple of bucks, and if you spend $50 or more, you get free shipping. We have every single variety of Patriot Cooler at this point. I've got a bin out in my garage of the extra Patriot Coolers, like their soft backpack. We gave away as gifts their soft-sided coolers, which make great lunch boxes. If you guys want a good company, it says Patriot right on the front of them. They won't cancel you like Yeti. If you want to get them custom engraved or you want to have your own messaging on them, you can go through the Suspendables collection or even your own corporate logos. And if you guys are looking for a bigger connection, if you want to get something for like your whole company, by all means, just email me. It's info@KyleSeraphin.com, and I'll connect you with their guys behind the scenes. They will get you a custom quote that will not get you canceled for having a conservative message on there. The website is patriotcoolers.com. If you're looking for the Kyle Seraphin Show collection, you can go and just check out the link in the show description. Again, don't forget the promo code KYLE. Save yourself 10% on one of their great products. They are something that I use literally every single day, and it's always on my desk here. So whenever you guys see behind the scenes and you look over, there it is right there. It's sitting on the desk. There's usually more than one because I'm kind of lazy about taking them downstairs. Luckily, I've got many. All right, I'm going to keep getting into this story here. Again, this Venezuelan migrant blows my mind that they went down there to do this interview, claims that he was forced to sign a piece of paper saying that he was part of a gang, And then that was allowing them to deport him. Now he's been like sort of sustained in the United States because suddenly leftists care about due process. Here's a little clip from CNN and our favorite Scott Jennings, who just dismantles this stuff. They can't even get the words correct, right? They're going to claim that remember, they've been mixing the words illegal immigration, illegal alien, undocumented immigrant, migrant, asylum seeker, and refugee. They've been mixing that up into a smoothie of nonsense for about the last, 8 years, ever since Donald Trump became the most racist person in the history of America. So here's your favorite kind of people on the left, and our guy Scott Jennings, who's become kind of the spirit animal over on CNN to watch. He seriously one-handedly fights off all these people, and as we said on Friday, it's like a retard fight, so it's not real difficult for him to fight them one-handed.
President and this administration can accuse somebody of being a terrorist and accuse any one of us of being a terrorist and do with us what they will. There's due process that exists in this country for everybody, and the fact that this man had received no due process, he was effectively disappeared to a foreign country, a country which he came from, which he was basically got asylum.
It's not a foreign country. He lives there.
Excuse me, no, he does not live there.
He's a citizen of El Salvador.
Scott, excuse me, he got asylum in this country.
He's a citizen.
Scott,
does he have asylum?
Excuse me, let me finish.
No, he doesn't.
No, it's not that he, sorry, it's not that he got asylum. He got a judge to say that he could not be rendered back.
Does he have a deportation order?
Excuse me, he could not be. Can you let me finish? He could not be rendered back to El Salvador because he was at risk of being harmed in El Salvador. That is what a federal judge. That is what a federal judge.
By who? No, who was he at risk of?
Excuse me. That was what a federal judge said. He could not be deported. He could not be. Who could he be at risk by? I don't know. But
a rival gang.
It's a rival gang. That's the danger, because he's a freaking MS-13 member, and because MS-13 guys put their gang signs where people can see them. So this actually blew my mind. I found this clip. This is from, I think Laura Powell's the one who actually shared this out. This is the prison. He wasn't at the Supermax that was highly touted, that Senator Chris Van Hollen got like 3 kilometers away from. He was at a different prison, and it's called the Santa Ana prison. And I'm going to show you kind of an expose of somebody touring that prison. And that's why he was able to get out and drink margaritas, because he wasn't sitting in a Supermax where they shaved his head. You notice he still had his facial hair, right? They didn't cut all of his hair off his head. He looked pretty much the same that he did in all the pictures when he was deported from the United States, because he ended up in this prison, apparently, this Santa Ana prison, which looks kind of like a work camp for dudes. I'm going to show you a couple little clips. Again, you cannot get factual information. What you get is hysteria. And then when you dig into the story, you're like, he's from El Salvador. He's a citizen of El Salvador. He's not from the United States. They consider him to be someone who belongs in a prison, but he's in this prison, not the one that they said.
We're going to enter a prison where prisoners pay for their sentences by working for the government in exchange for speeding up their freedom, where there are no cells or shackles. Here, criminals grow and harvest their own food. This is the self-sustaining prison of El Salvador. Friends, today we have very exclusive access. We are going to enter one of the few prisons in the world where there are no cells or shackles, and prisoners do not wear chains. It is even said that prisoners have access to weapons, not exactly firearms, but machetes, knives, and scissors. We are about to enter the Santa Ana prison in El Salvador. We are about to pass through the gates and security checkpoints. As I crossed the gate, I met people who appeared to be the prison's maintenance staff. However, they are prisoners. All of the workers we will meet have committed crimes ranging from the most minor to the most serious, such as murder. The prison kitchen serves 15,000 meals a day. These are foods grown, harvested, and cooked by the prisoners. But not only that, all the metal shelving and even the kitchens were made by them. I had the opportunity to speak with the head chef, a professional chef who had his own cooking show on television. He was imprisoned due to mistakes, and here in prison, he teaches his skills to others.
I mean, like, this is the difference between the messaging you get and then maybe the reality on the ground. Here's some things. Not only are they allowed to just like cook their own food and run around and grow stuff, this is like working at like an organic farm, from what I can tell. My wife almost volunteered to go down and do that. Before we met, she was going to go down to a place like this, El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, Nicaragua, one of these countries. I can't remember which one. And she was going to go grow food. She was going to just go work on a farm like these guys are doing. Like, this is a thing that people would actually go out there and do volunteer basis. And they get to have a band and music. It's crappy music, but here they are playing all these guys in yellow shirts that you're seeing. These are all inmates. Everyone here is an inmate of this prison. Like, what the hell? By the way, do you only need to know like 5 words to sing anything in these Spanish songs? They all have the same beat. They all sound the same to me. And they're always saying amor and corazón every single time. Like, that's all. I just had to keep up on it. All right. The lies are ubiquitous. The lies are over and over and over again. And this is the thing that probably should have been hammered home. And thankfully, at least somebody went out on CNN and said it. The same thing we said here. What about the story in the family of Rachel Morin? How do you end up in that space where you can completely ignore the one reality that should be like just easily understood? That there was an American citizen who lost her life. The conviction happened. Here, we actually have this is the slide from last week. Victor Martinez Hernandez was found guilty of killing this Maryland woman. By the way, I'm starting to see the news media is shifting, including some of the main sites. They're no longer calling him a Maryland man. Apparently, that must be polling really, really badly. They are now calling him a Salvadorian man. How about the actual Maryland mother that died, that was killed? You just shut these people down in their tracks when you ask simple questions. It's nice to at least see that somebody showed up with the facts. This is Erin McGuire. She's apparently a Republican strategist, so she's on the GOP side. And she's pointing out something that, we did here as well. How do you focus in on the wrong thing so aggressively and miss the point?
Hit Van Hollen. Rachel Morin was a constituent of his who was murdered, and he didn't call her mother. He did not do this level of outreach, but for a man who was illegally here in the United States, he is pouring over himself, flying abroad to make sure that this man is taken care of. But his actual constituents, the citizens of the United States, those people didn't matter to him. So Republicans will continue to win this argument because Van Hollen and Democrats just don't get it.
Well, I actually, no, I think it's a great story if you're saying people grabbed off the street without.
Actually, that mannish-looking woman, I don't know what her name is, but I see her on all these different news shows. They bring her on so she can talk and hold the other point of view. The Tennessee Star doing yeoman's work over here as a pretty small outlet that gets oversized, at least attention in my feed. They seem to be doing very good actual journalistic stuff. They were the ones that are suing now the Trump administration for the trans manifesto coming out of the school shooting, right? And this is another piece that they got access to because it happened in their backyard. Tennessee Star obtains body cam images and apparently the entire footage. They went out there and requested this huge dump of FOIA and public records requests, and they found there's a picture of the guy. He apparently had 7 people, which we talked about, doing what is human trafficking like behavior when you're driving a bunch of illegal aliens in the vehicle. And you are a quote-unquote Maryland man. And, of course, as we discussed here, it sounds like the FBI said we're not going to prosecute, which means that there was a policy under the Biden DOJ in 2022 that probably said 7 or more is the requirement, or maybe they needed 10 illegal aliens in the car. But this is what human trafficking looks like. Trafficking is not always sex trafficking, by the way. Sometimes it's for labor. Sometimes it's just moving people in because they're smugglers, and the cargo that they smuggle are humans. There's overwhelming evidence this guy has no business being here. For someone to put all of their weight into it, and like I said, it is still dominating the news stories across all the different websites out there that I check into. It's the Pope and this guy and other illegals. And how do we keep 19-year-old TDA guys that are suddenly experts on U.S. law? It's bizarre. It's just bizarre. What you don't hear a ton of is this one. How about the fact that when you bring a bunch of illegals in and they're associated with criminal elements, sometimes they do stuff that's fairly unsettling, like try to transport 180,000 rounds of ammunition back down to Mexico where we know the cartels are at. Almost all of the cartel weaponry is bought in the United States through some sort of illegal means, including what the Obama administration facilitated, and then they just drive it south through the border. Why? Because coming into the United States, you get checked in by immigration and what are they called? They're called the Border and CBP, Customs and Border Protection, guys in the blue uniform. If you come through a port of entry, it's Border Patrol. If you go through a non-entry, you get the green uniform. But on the way down into Mexico, $20 and you buy your way in. They don't care what's coming into their country. I've seen, if you've ever been down to a border checkpoint, particularly a least traveled one. I went down to the one in Antelope Wells one time, and I spent hours and hours there, hung out in there, watched them come through. They get 20 cars a day coming through the U.S. side. 20 cars from the south driving north. And they are torn apart. They pull the car out, they run the dogs, they run the scans, they interview the people, they've got all the questions, they're looking at the documents, because a lot of these people are like visiting family members and so on. They have like a travel visa for a couple minutes. They're going to go see somebody in Phoenix, they're going to go see somebody in Tucson or something like that. Then you look at what goes on the United States side driving down. It's like a high five and a wave. And it's this crappy guard shack that has no air conditioning, where nobody wants to be at, where the people who are running that checkpoint south, they don't care. They don't want to see anything to do with it. That's maybe how you get this story, where somebody was trying to move, and it's just by incidental contact. Again, this is why law enforcement, cops, not FBI, not big investigations by the federal government, cops are the ones who actually interdict real criminals. Check this out.
2 Mexican citizens are facing federal charges after they were allegedly traveling in a car carrying 180,000 rounds of ammunition in southern Colorado. According to the criminal complaint, Martinez Solis and Ivan Amador Gaviria were arrested after a Fremont County deputy pulled them over in Canyon City for not dimming their headlights as they drove by. During that stop, officers found 180 boxes of ammunition, each of which contained 1,000 rounds. There were approximately 150 boxes of .308 ammunition, a common hunting round, and about 30 boxes of .762 ammo, which is commonly used in AK-47s. Both Solis and Gaviria are now being charged with unlawful possession of ammunition by an alien admitted under non-immigrant U.S. visa.
Yeah, that lady talking about calibers makes me very uncomfortable. .308 is a common hunting round, of course, and .762, no further information. Just the fact that she doesn't know what .762 variety. Was it by 39, her AK-47? Was it, was it by 51, which would essentially be the military version of the .308? Is it by 54 Russian? Yeah, anyway. There are other calibers. So I don't know from looking at those boxes, neither do you from this story. 180,000 rounds. Is that going to be able to fight a war? No, it's not. But it's more than most people are able to hold on to. And they're Mexican nationals that had no business being in the United States. So they shouldn't have been able to get in there and do anything. But they got in so they can go buy stuff in a gun store. You can go buy ammunition if you want. You can do that in Texas. You can do it in Colorado, as far as I know. You can't do it in California anymore. You need a background check. So we're talking about people coming in with nefarious intent. We have to assume that's a pretty decent stockpile. When they always talk about what do they say? It's like a small arsenal, and it's like a couple thousand rounds with that, which is basically like a range trip for a real serious actor. Okay, sure. But you're talking about people that have no business being here. They can't even own a weapon in this area, and they're obviously heading down to take it somewhere. We should be a little bit concerned about that. And who solves it? Was this a long-term investigation by our federal authorities? Was this the ATF going out there and finding illegals that are buying like huge, a pallet worth of ammo? No. Was it the DEA tracking like sophisticated drug smuggling and or, narco trafficking so they can get their ammunition down south to the cartels? No. Was it the FBI who could theoretically touch both of those topics? Title 18, Title 21 stuff? No. No, it's local cops who saw somebody who didn't dim their headlights. This is why I keep getting irritated with the discussion, the talking point that we're seeing our current FBI director out there calling FBI agents cops. It's offensive to cops, by the way, folks. It's not because the FBI is better than cops. It's because the cops actually do the real work. They accidentally encounter the public, and they assume all the danger and risk of going and doing traffic stops and finding things like this. Tons of if you go listen to Steve Friend's feed, or if you read it rather on X, he's basically made a minor career over there of taking FBI press releases and showing that almost all of the major press releases that the federal government takes credit for come from local cops doing local cop things. Incidental traffic contact, pulling people over for speeding, finding out that they were actually a top 10 most wanted criminal, pulling people over for not dimming their lights, finding out that they have 180,000 rounds that are going down to cartels. Local cops doing local cop things, protecting the public, responding when the public calls 911. You're never going to get the FBI that calls when you call 911. And the FBI doesn't have that culture, which is my big problem here. We've realized that some of the myths that are out there, myths about the military, that we're going to have officers that were going to stand up for us, that we're going to do the right thing. Myths that our government was going to look out for the number one people, like the actual citizens, and instead they're going after illegal aliens. Let's do something from DOD for a second. Just want to talk about it briefly. If you guys haven't read this, it's over on Breitbart. I recommend you check it out. This is John Frankman. He's been a guest of our program. He is a former seminarian. He was training to be a Catholic priest. So there's our little tie-in to what we started the day off with. He's a Green Beret, and he's now no longer, he's a former Green Beret at this point. He was a Green Beret officer. And he's writing a piece that discusses the DOD's effort to reinstate the unvaccinated troop. By the way, that has not happened for the federal government. People who said, I'm not going to get the COVID shots and I'm going to be eliminated from my job. Everybody who had that experience is still waiting for some sort of justice or messaging from the Trump administration. And the one for DOD kind of misses the mark. And the biggest piece that I saw in it, and you guys can go read his piece as well, but the biggest piece that DOD's did is that they didn't want to take any blame. We continually have this culture where government never wants to assign blame to itself. And if you've ever been a whistleblower, if you've ever been someone who even just stood up in your own environment, there are plenty of times when companies have to acknowledge blame. But our government never does, because our government actually works on its own behalf. It would invalidate itself. And all of that is a leftist position. And all of that is to say that we keep finding out that the way that people who work in government, particularly the administrative end of it, they all vote hard to the left. And it's very dangerous to people in America. If your representative, democratically elected, or, if your populist representatives go out there and they just don't serve both sides of the constituency. It's not sustainable. I'll play you something tomorrow. I've got some clips that I've been digging on. It's talking about the amount of political donations. This is the case. Doesn't matter what government agency you go to. Usually I've looked at the federal because they actually keep track of this through the consolidated federal campaign. People can actually give a piece of their paycheck and they can donate to their causes. And they lean left aggressively. And their political donations. I had a clip earlier, but I didn't want to play it. Scott Jennings talking about the fact that 96% of Harvard professors all vote and give money to leftist causes. It's the same thing inside the federal government. So we have an academy, we have a news media, we have our federal and probably most of our state as well, people who believe that government is the solution. And for all of us that are out here that don't and just want to be left alone, you're outnumbered where it counts, the people who are actually doing this work. And how do you fix that? Fix it with culture. This is a story that came out of Vanity Fair. This is bizarre. I don't ever read Vanity Fair. I don't even know how this came into my attention. But the story is FBI agent who accidentally became a hero for the Trump resistance. Why is there a Trump resistance at all in an executive agency that works for the president? And we can just dispense with the fake story that the FBI doesn't theoretically actually serve the executive branch. It's an executive branch agency. Brian Driscoll drew acclaim and inspired memes after making a principled stand. Of course, it's principled when he does it. It wasn't principled when other people who said maybe what Joe Biden was saying was unlawful, illegal, and immoral. It's a principled stand and has so far withstood any MAGA purge. Driz is popular, and maybe they just wanted to tone down the drama a bit, says FBI veteran. They go through and they quote and talk about what a great guy he is, that he served in war zones, that he accidentally was elevated to the position that he was in because of an administrative mistake. He was supposed to be the deputy director, the acting deputy director, but he accidentally became the actual director. They moved him in. This story is pretty remarkable. And so you start saying, well, he hasn't been removed. And he stood aggressively against and said that he wasn't even going to comply with his bosses over at DOJ and give over the list of people that were involved in January 6th. Why do we need to re-adjudicate January 6th? Why do we need to have those names? Not for public, but so you can individually find out who are the people that were pushing a political agenda within your law enforcement. It's the opposite of what's going on in Seattle. Assuming that people who attended a political rally on their own time are guilty is a problem if you're doing it and you're trying to publicize it. In the same way, refusing to acknowledge that people went full bore into a political prosecution, okay? There's a big difference between attending a rally on your own time and people who, for their job, decided to lean into something that was never done before, not in the history of our political, supposed to be apolitical law enforcement. They picked a side. That was the crazy thing. And they made this guy, Brian Driscoll, a hero out of it. I'm going to play you a couple of quick clips because I think they're relevant. The question is what about the people that had principled disagreement with what was going on inside of their agency? And interestingly enough, there's this guy that a lot of us listened to for a long time who now has a position that he could actually be fixing it. And somehow he's a cheerleader for the same agency. He had this conversation with me less than 2 years ago. So I'm just going to share with you a little piece from the Dan Bongino show. Some of you guys may recognize this. This is back when we were still sitting in the RV out on the lot next to my parents' house because I was homeless at the time.
Either. But I know a few guys who were disturbed by stuff. Does anybody ever say, like, this doesn't sound right? Like, maybe we shouldn't be doing this?
Well, you kind of see what happens if you do that, right? So you get tossed out. You got people like my buddy Steve Friend, who went up and talked to his boss and said the same thing. And they question whether or not you have the capacity to do this work. There's a lot of blind obedience to the FBI. There's a lot of belief that it's the right thing to do at all times, that they're always in the right, and that you got to protect the entity that is the Bureau. But, you know, my oath wasn't to the Bureau. It was to the Constitution. And a lot of what people forget, you know, the Constitution doesn't give us any rights. It restricts the governments from infringing on our personal rights. These are God-given rights. These are things that we believe as Americans that we're born with. So my ability to go and protest or gather and petition Congress or the government, those are all things that are innate as a human being. That's what we believe as Americans, whether people know it or not anymore. It's, you know, civics has kind of fallen off. But it's troubling because you see a lot of these folks that are looking at, we talked about the golden handcuffs when you and I first sat down. You know, I just had there's an article in Town Hall, and I don't want to give it any more credence than it needs, but it went from, it's an author that was my former supervisor. And, you know, he was a coward. He hid. He got into a 14 job, a GS-14, which is a supervisory job. And he knew what he was doing was, you know, cowardly, and he just rode out the last 18 months so that he could get to his pension. And he did all the nasal swabs that they asked him, even though he didn't get the COVID shots. He just played along until he could get out. And now he's writing these great pieces about how the FBI is so noble. It's not. You know, there's a lot of great people. I know them. Some of them have never done anything wrong. They've never been asked to do anything wrong, and they've never been put in the situation where they've got to make a call for all their chips. But what we see is that when people went to Mar-a-Lago. The whole team went there and did the raid. People flew down, got on a plane and flew from Washington, D.C. And like I said, I don't know all of them, but I know the guy who signed the receipt for the search warrant. I know him personally, and I sat next to him for years. So, and he's a decent human being. Like I don't have any animosity towards the guy, but given the opportunity to do the right thing, it didn't happen. So that's very troubling, right? I mean, there's a lot of it in there.
It is, and I think, you know, guys like you and me, and this isn't like a self-laudatory moment. You're not that kind of guy either.
Yeah, guys like you and me. But where did he go is the question. Like, how do you fix this problem? Because he recognized that problem for years. How come a guy who accidentally became a hero resisting Trump, who gets celebrated for that? How does that guy? You'll notice my messaging is consistent. Not everybody, I don't do broad brushes. But I will say that institutions are generically awful. And the crazy thing is the guy that could actually do something about it right now knew the solution. I'm going to play you the solution. It's about personnel. It's not about personnel who did something on their own time and has a private political belief that they're allowed to have. It's about people that are doing their political beliefs under color of law, and we cannot have that. We should not have that. Here's the current director of the FBI, back when he was still wearing Make America Based Again t-shirts, saying what the solution is, and he's not doing it.
Personnel is how you take on any corrupt apparatus in Washington, D.C., because they are the ones in Washington, D.C., these government gangsters, implementing these corrupt, weaponized system of justice, intelligence, and defense. And what you need is sweeping personnel changes in the leadership structures of the agencies that we've been talking about, Steve, for 10 years now? And we've given example after example. And what you have to do is, in my opinion, is take not one at a time, take them all at once. And with the Senate package that came in last night, and with maybe another even one or two possible more seats, Steve, I think what you do is you move forward all of your personnel packages in unison, because you now have the numbers to support a President Trump agenda. And hopefully Congress, as you said, it's a multifaceted effort. It's not just the executive branch. You got to go in there and be working with Congress, the Senate, and the House to implement constitutional oversight so they can expose the corruption of the agencies and departments that they've been overseeing.
You guys get it? Did you hear what he said? For those of you in the chat that are confused about why I'm telling you this is a problem, he just said you got to do it all at once. You have to move forward all of these things at the exact same time. Like, where are these guys? I want to know. Because they knew that you didn't have that much time. You don't get that much time to take over. You don't get to softly touch this. Anybody who's been in law enforcement who wants to take control of a situation, I want you to just think about it. Every time you've gone after someone and you've had a positive outcome where somebody submitted to authority, did you go in soft and meek and gentle and weak and loving and try to dress like they are and me same, you same and try to build rapport? Or did you firmly let them know that there will be no more? Cutesy time is over in a manner of speaking. There is no chance for you to take this slowly and think that it works. And they may have already lost back when this happened, back when you had a guy who stepped up, pushed back against the issue. He said, I'm not going to comply with the Justice Department. I'm going to defend the institution that is the FBI, as is the nature of all FBI long-term employees. Anybody who wasn't willing to stand up previously, because I know this, that guy also didn't lose his job over COVID. He didn't stand up and tell everybody we're not going to comply because it's wrong. One of the people that I was most proud of working with, someone I didn't know, but I found out after the fact, he lost his job because he wouldn't tell them whether or not he had gotten the COVID shots, and he had gotten them. He just refused because he said it was none of the government's damn business. He lost his job doing the thing that I refused to do, but he did it when he would have actually been safe because of it. Do you know how powerful that is? That's people who have principles. It just makes you ask the question. It makes you wonder, where are those people that were so tough? Why can they not step forward and do the job? And we're not done with this situation. We're going to talk maybe lab leak stuff tomorrow because the White House put out a whole thing here. I'll give you kind of a tease of it. I didn't want to get into it today because it's going to take more digestion. But all of us were told that we were nuts because of the lab week story. The White House put out Lab Week, the true origins of COVID-19, and then basically went out there and discussed the proximal origins of the virus that took down Trump 1.0. If we're being really honest, COVID was the final mechanism by which they were able to eliminate. They changed the game, and it was insane what they did. And so who did that? Who were those people? And it goes back to Obama, which we've heard about a lot from some of the people you just saw on the screen. It goes back to Fauci, who hasn't been arrested, who was pardoned, apparently, but we've been told that these things, the Trump administration doesn't mind running over the top of certain things. Why are they worried about running over the top of like some garbage, auto pen pardon? Here's Tucker Carlson talking about vaccines. I promise this thing here, and then I'll have something that's Easter related to kind of close us out as we kind of get this week started off. And it has nothing to do with anything else other than it's just funny. So here's our last serious thought, that institutions have been lying to us, and we have to fix this problem. And we have to ask questions. We have to be skeptical, even of the people we want to believe, including when I listened to him say that he was in the business of deception. And I like Tucker Carlson, what he has to say. And at the same time, he's kind of admitting that the entire profession is about slanting and curating information for people.
I was not against vaccines. I hadn't really thought about them. I thought they were, I guess, miracles of science. That's what I was told. I don't even know what I think of vaccines now. But I'm skeptical. But the COVID vax, all I knew, I didn't know anything about mRNA technology. Of course, I still am not an expert on that. But I know a lot about human deception because that's been my job my whole life. And also I try to pay attention to whether something is true or false. And the behavior of the people selling me that was so transparently dishonest. I didn't know that the vax wouldn't work, which it didn't, of course. I didn't know that it would cause harm, which it did. But I did know that the people selling it were liars. Like I knew that instantly. And I know some of them, but I could just tell by their behavior they're lying. And I was like, I don't know what this is. No one in my family's getting this. We're not doing this. And I'm not doing this, period.
He mentioned that he was in the business of human deception. I just found that to be quite telling, but at the same time, your instincts are almost always correct on these things. And if somebody changes their tune so dramatically on everything, you should pay attention. It tells you something. Your instincts are good at picking these things up. And if you are having to make explanations, there's an old expression, if you're explaining, you're losing. And I'm seeing a lot of explaining from people, which means that we're losing. Something to chew on. All right, here's somebody who doesn't have to ever explain anything because he's Liam Neeson, and that's who he is. This is our little laugh for the day. Let me just say before we do that, before we do the palate cleanser, if you guys want to watch the show over on Rumble, we appreciate that. You guys can always check us out, rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. If you're watching over there, give us a like. We'd appreciate that. If you're watching over on YouTube, it's Kyle Seraphin. It's at Kyle Seraphin, so check us there. Make sure you're giving us a like. Make sure you're subscribing to the channel there. And then lastly, you can always share it at KyleSeraphinShow.com. That's the Spotify version. For those of you who want to see our interview with Andy Scheckman a day early, or any of the Sunday specials or the Sunday sit-downs a day early, you can check out Locals. You can become a subscriber there and support us financially, which is pretty cool. Again, it's a one-man show. It's just this guy sitting at the desk with a Patriot cooler and whatever's around me. Probably one of the cooler offices I've ever sat in. But it's only because I was able to build it up myself here, and that's because of you guys, so we really appreciate all that. Let's do something that makes us smile. Liam Neeson, I just found this. It has nothing to do with anything, but it made me laugh too much not to share with you. So here's Liam Neeson doing his impression of the Easter Bunny, looking for work, and it's exactly what you hope it would be.
Here comes Peter Cottontail, hopping down the bunny trail. Hippity, hoppity. Easter is on his way.
This time, why don't we keep it light? Remember, it's for children and he's a bunny.
Do you understand what's happening here? He's hopping down the bunny trail, hippity hoppity. He's coming. He's an unstoppable force. Measured. Inevitable. Eggs aren't the only thing that'll be dying tonight.
I'm sorry, is that the bunny saying that?
If you have to ask, you don't understand the bunny's mindset.
I think I do. He's a bunny bringing candy to children.
Yes, he's a bunny. But a bunny is laying eggs. He's a freak of nature, a confused, grotesque monster. There's no telling what he's capable of. But why do you think he's holding up carrot, pal?
Because it's what he likes to eat?
No. By employing the bunny's certain set of skills, he can gnaw it down into a shape. Slip it between people's ribs over on them.
Okay. Well, that's good. Thanks for coming in. We'll give you a call.
Oh, well, call soon. I need the job, and I'm running out of relatives to be taken.
There's something really good about actors who, generally speaking, are just like repeating other people's lines that have no self-awareness. And then you got Liam Neeson there doing the Peter Cottontail routine where he actually kind of looks at himself and pokes fun. I don't know why that's so fun, but I enjoy it. All right, that was a long Monday opening. I hope we have an interesting week here. We'll say rest in peace, Pope Francis. Pray for the repose of his soul. J.D. Vance said as much after his visit there. And then we've got an interesting week coming up. So maybe we'll see some good movement. Be nice if we didn't have to keep talking about immigration because maybe the left will leave it alone. We'll see. God bless all of you. Thanks for being part of the program. I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow at 0930 Eastern Time. And see you then.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.